Let's talk more about reopening now. We are joined once again by Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat of Ohio. And he's joining us as the governor of his state, Mike DeWine, a Republican, is outlining plans for reopening as soon as next week to bring back in things like elective surgeries, construction and manufacturing, and then a phased in plan. Senator, it's good to have you back once again. You'll have to hit *6 on your phone so that we can hear your comments on this. And I'm just curious to get your take, first of all. If you can hit *6, that would be great. *6 on your phone. I think the senator is still muted, so I'll bring in, oh, there he is. Senator, it's good to have you back with us. Appreciate it.
You didn't think I could figure that out, did you?
I mean, I do this every day, and I can't figure it out half the time, so you're not
You're
alone.
the first person I've had to do that with. I don't know what it is about Yahoo, but anyway, okay.
Well, we appreciate you making the effort. So talk to us about Governor DeWine's plans to open the state. Do you think it's too fast? What do you think he should be doing differently?
Yeah, I'll start with this. That Governor DeWine, this isn't a partisan statement. Governor DeWine's a Republican. I'm a Democrat. We have not been political allies in the past, but I would say unequivocally that his work to engage in this early and to be bold, working with Dr. Amy Acton in Ohio, has undoubtedly saved lives of Ohioans. It's kept a lot of Ohioans from being sick and saved a lot of lives. I make the, again, not a partisan statement, the equally certain in my mind statement that what President Trump has not done, President Trump was still calling this a hoax when Governor DeWine was working on it and doing things in Ohio. What President Trump has not done and has done badly will cost American lives. So I start with that with Governor DeWine. I like how he's done this. I'm confident that he will move. I talk to him pretty often. I'm confident he will move slowly as he reopens the economy in Ohio. I think that doing what he's doing with elective or non-essential, use whatever adjective you want, surgeries makes sense. I don't think that there are many things I don't think the governor is willing to do yet, because I know the governor wants way more testing. He's not getting much help out of Washington there. And he understands that you need more protective equipment. We don't have enough protective equipment for our hospitals or our grocery store clerks or our bus drivers. There have been 30 or more bus drivers around the country who have died from coronavirus because they haven't had protection. So we shouldn't be opening the economy without making sure our frontline workers have better protections.
Senator, it's Adam Shapiro. Always good to talk to you. You have proposed what you call the Heroes Fund, essentially paying the essential workers you were just talking about roughly $13 an hour more. And that's everybody. We're not just talking medical people, but the folks who work at a Heinen's in Ohio or a Publix in the South, Kroger's, the supermarkets, the grocery folk who have always been the lowest paid among us, but now serve one of the most important, crucial roles we could have. What kind of traction are you getting with that? Is this something that could actually happen, that legislation get through?
I don't know. We're getting a lot of interest. And today, interestingly enough, is it's called Workers' Memorial Day, as we celebrate our country and our veterans at the end of May. Every April, in many places around the country, we honor workers who were killed in the job or injured in the job, or just workers generally that go to work every day in circumstances that aren't always the safest. And those are often low and moderate paid workers. And as you say, so many of our frontline workers, the people that do the laundry at hospitals, the people who prepare the food and do security and do custodial work, the people that drive buses and who are doing all kinds of work at $13, $14, $15 an hour. And we expect them to do that with the anxiety of possibly getting the virus, and then the anxiety of going home and possibly exposing their diabetic spouse or asthmatic child to this is just too much to ask. And we ought to, and I don't know if we can convince the President of the United States that pandemic pay is something we ought to do. We have not yet convinced Senator McConnell. I think most Senate Democrats, maybe all Senate Democrats, are supportive of it. We're going to keep talking about it and keep building the pressure, because these are workers that, as you say, Adam, are absolutely essential to us as a nation. They deliver the packages to our home. They're doing all the work that many of us get to stay home are privileged enough to get to stay home and be paid for our work while they do that work. And so it's something we just keep fighting for.
And of course, Senator, there are all of the folks who are out of work right now, and there's a lot of efforts in Congress, of course, to address that and efforts to help small businesses. There is also a new effort to stop large companies from doing deals. As I'm sure you're aware, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez today introduced legislation to prevent companies from doing mergers and acquisitions right now, both public companies as well as private equity and hedge funds from doing these kinds of deals. What do you think of that legislation? Is that something that needs to be addressed right now to also, I'm not sure what the end goal is, I guess, to help keep people working, to keep mergers and acquisitions from them cutting jobs? I don't know. What do you think of it?
I think it makes sense, and I appreciate Senator Warren's doing that. I look at, I mean, there are always people in any society that will try to take advantage of a disaster, of a catastrophe, or an emergency. And when companies do things like that, when people profiteer, when people, and that's sort of the old-fashioned word, profiteering from a tough situation, and we shouldn't do anything now that is compromising our ability to move forward. I mean, the President of the United States is weakening environmental laws during this. The President of the United States is continuing to go after the Affordable Care Act. He's closed down the window of availability to sign up with the Affordable Care Act. They are continuing their lawsuit, which right now, because of a Republican governor, John Kasich, and me in Ohio, a Democratic senator, 600,000 people have insurance in Ohio because of expanded Medicaid, and the president's lawsuit's trying to take that away. I mean, why in the world would you do any of those things? Merge a company, lay off people as a result of the merger.
Well,
why would you take away health care during this emergency?
What if it's the difference between merging a company and going out of business? In other words, what if you're in dire financial straits and that's why you want to combine with another company? Yes, there might be job cuts, but wouldn't that be better than going out of business entirely?
Well, I didn't write their bill, and I'm not an expert on it, but I don't think that, I think you allow for that. I mean, if it's keeping somebody in business and keeping their employees employed, of course you allow for that. But if it's typically mergers are opportunities that CEOs and large corporations see. They call it market efficiencies, but many of the efficiencies are cutting wages, closing down plants, and laying off workers. So I think the burden's on them to show that they really need this to keep people employed rather than use this as an opportunity to make more money at their workers' expense, especially on Workers' Memorial Day, I would add.
Senator Brown, Melody Hom here. Of course, amid all of this, it also happens to be the primary day in Ohio. And of course, Ohio has a lot of responsibility on its shoulders as it has determined every presidential election, I think, since 1960. When you think about the essential all-male contest that is taking place today, do you think that the state was prepared and equipped to move forward as such?
Well, the state did its best. I'm not going to shoot arrows at what state and local governments did. I was Secretary of State in the 80s and ran the election system. But the good news about this in Ohio is that Ohio did show, even with very, very short notice, because it just sort of happened. The governor canceled the primary the day before, canceled the day of the primary, canceled that date as the primary, and then made it all by mail, the legislature. So if they're confident enough we can do that in Ohio in short notice, we sure as hell ought to do that nationally when we have 6 months to prepare. I mean, the election this year should be, sure, the polls should be open election day, but we should have 1 month of early voting in every community in the country, including Sundays. People can go directly from church to voting, for instance, and let pastors and others organize if they want, however people want to do early voting. And then we should have vote by mail. So people should have three options. They either vote by mail, and they know how to get the absentee application should be mailed directly to them, so everybody knows that, or they can vote early at the boards of elections for 4 or 5 weeks before the election, or they should be able to vote on election day. And if there's a pandemic problem, we all know what happened in Milwaukee. We saw those pictures. We also know now that at least a couple dozen people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus because the very, very, very partisan U.S. Supreme Court followed the very partisan decisions of the local government in Wisconsin and caused those people to get sick. I mean, those illnesses are on that Supreme Court that always vote with Roberts and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and that very partisan Supreme Court. That's on them, those illnesses in Wisconsin. I feel particularly strong about that because I ran the state's election system. As I said in Ohio 30 years ago, I never would have let that happen in my state. It was just absolutely immoral what they did.
And just thinking about the potential outcome then, right? When people are going to exercise their right to vote, do you anticipate that Trump will be reelected come November?
No, I think we're going to beat Trump in Ohio. And if we beat Trump, carried Ohio by 8 points. He carried Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida by 1. I think we're going to beat him in Ohio. I think it's going to be close, but if we beat him in Ohio, we're going to beat him decisively in those other states. And I said earlier that because of his mismanagement of the pandemic, first is firing workers that would have seen the pandemic coming from China, then his continued denials, then his unwillingness to take responsibility, then his inability or incompetence or unwilling to have a national test program and a national PPE protective equipment mission to get that to our communities. That's caused tens of thousands of people to get sick and untold number to die. Think of this number. The United States is 4% of the world's population. We are now close to 1/3 of all the illnesses, of 1/3 of the coronavirus diagnoses in the world. 4% of the world's population, 32% of all the coronavirus illnesses in the United States. That's because our president has been immoral and incompetent and focused on himself and not on the people in this country.
Senator Dan Roberts here. Thanks for joining us again. If we head back to your plan for reopening in Ohio, and obviously we're seeing a number of those plans emerge on a state-by-state basis, obviously Georgia reopening, the debate right now is over kind of the potential risks of the inconsistencies. That is, doing it kind of staggered state by state. We had one expert on one of our live shows saying, gosh, it would be a lot easier if it were a, one uniform national roadmap for reopening states. I mean, one state reopens its economy, the other is still doing stay at home. You could go to work in the state that is reopened, but then you could come back to your state and infect someone. What are the risks there, and how are you thinking about, balancing that when you think about reopening Ohio if other states that still have more cases remain closed for longer?
Well, first of all, I don't make the decision about reopening Ohio. The governor does. I give advice, but he takes whatever, but most of his advice, as it should, comes from his medical people and his public health professionals. I don't know. I mean, that's a really hard question. When I look at some of these southern states, 3 in particular, where they have many Trumps as governors, you have Texas, Georgia, and Florida they're trying to out-Trump Trump on all this stuff. And I'm concerned. Those are 3 big populous states with huge pockets of low-income people, a lot of immigrants in those states who are more likely because of living conditions and all of that to more likely perhaps to be exposed. They're in the workplace. They're doing jobs where they can't do social distancing because they're those kinds of jobs, and they're not getting the protective equipment. I think these governors are irresponsible as hell in doing this. I think DeWine has mostly been responsible. I'm concerned now that I don't know if we're opening too fast in Ohio. I still don't know exactly what the next steps are, but I listen to medical professionals. And if we had somebody at the White House that could speak about that people trusted, most of America doesn't trust President Trump to tell the truth about the coronavirus, doesn't trust him to take responsibility, and doesn't trust him to get the equipment, testing equipment and medical device and professional personal equipment, personal safety equipment to them. So I just don't know the answer to your question. I'm very concerned when 3 big states, especially the size 2 of them, Texas and Florida, open, because I know those people don't stay in those states. They travel all over and more likely to be exposed. And it concerns me for my country.
Senator, it's Adam again, and forgive me if you already answered this because I had a tech issue with my computer. But in regards to the mail-in voting, the president has been attacking the Postal Service. What is going on there? And is there anything that Mitch McConnell or that the Senate can do to protect the postal carriers from the threats the president is making?
Well, the first question, Adam, is what president of the United States attacks the Postal Service? I mean, he attacks his own cabinet and his own chair of the Federal Reserve, too. But I mean, it just tells you a little bit about how somebody should manage an enterprise. Is you don't attack some of the key people that work for you. They have just refused. The Fed, I don't want to put too much detail here, but some years ago, Congress very wrongly forced the Postal Service to spend billions of dollars to pre-fund way into the future its retirement that no other federal agency ever has had to do. The Postal Service has sort of never caught up fiscally to be able to do their jobs. Now they're seeing this, the competition from the private carriers, obviously, first the internet, that's not really a private carrier, but then all the other privatized carriers that get some kinds of subsidies have made the Postal Service's job even harder. And now coronavirus. I mean, there are people, Senator Gillibrand had an op-ed in the New York Times this week about that, what service they provide, including elections, by moving ballots, we could do for many non-banked Americans. We could have the Postal Service be a place that they could bank. So instead, they don't have to go to payday lenders and all that. They've been supposed to do that. But it's also our history. And if we don't do something, I'm very concerned, as Senator Gillibrand, our editorial was, are very concerned the Postal Service literally goes out of business. And that's hundreds of thousands of generally middle-class jobs, especially available to people of color when few other middle-class jobs were over the last couple generations. And it would be a national travesty if McConnell continued to block our ability to help the Postal Service here.
Senator, it's Julie again. One final question for you, and that has to do with tax relief. Apparently, the president, who was just speaking at the White House a little while ago, floated the idea of some kind of middle-class tax relief. I know that you, along with Senator Whitehouse, have introduced a bill to repeal a tax relief for wealthier Americans that was as part of the CARES Act. Talk to me about that bill, how necessary it is, and whether you think there does need to be broader tax relief for Americans.
Well, first, thank you for that one, Julie. It's an election year, so of course Trump is talking about a tax break for middle-income Americans. But when his major tax bill of 3 years ago, almost 80% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1%, while it drove $1 trillion bigger hole in the federal budget. So I don't really pay a lot of attention to what he says now in election year about taxes, because I know that's what he wants to do. And in fact, it's what he did. He and McConnell tucked into this $2 trillion package that we did, which was mostly a good thing. Unemployment checks to everybody, local governments, hospitals, some moratorium on foreclosures and evictions, all that. Tucked in this $100 billion, maybe as much as $195 billion giveaway to the wealthiest people in the country. $100 billion of it will go to those who make more. It's basically a real estate tax break that will go to people making over $1 million, not worth $1 million a year, but not worth $1 million, but people that make over $1 million a year will get about $100 billion tax break here. And Senator Whitehouse has led the charge on this. I'm helping him to try to repeal this. It's insane that in the midst of this, we would give that kind of a tax break to the richest people in the country that certainly aren't going to spend it to keep people employed, and certainly aren't going to spend it to keep people in their rental apartments when they can't pay their rent, and their homes when they can't pay their mortgage. So it's just one of those special interest things that Mitch McConnell specialized in his career, and that's why it's time for him to go.
Sherrod Brown, Senator from Ohio, thank you all so much. It's always great to talk to you, and all the best to you and your family during this time.
Thanks to all of you. Thanks very much. All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.